my soul is not going to be satisfied unless I do this work in this lifetime in this way. And what I wanted to do initially is I wanted to spiritually bypass all of the business and marketing stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, can I just skip that part entirely? And that was my experience also. Like, I got help with that. If you're totally confident in your skills and ability of what you offer, and the holdup is tech, that's easy. Hire somebody, learn how to do it, whatever you need to do, right? So for me, that whole learning that piece was really important. And I did have to navigate. It was a big part of my healing journey, healing all of those places where I had resistance and all the places that it turns out I had a different perspective on. That wasn't true when I actually looked at it. And it was like, oh, actually, this isn't true anymore. Now I'm experiencing it a different way. So and then as I learned that, I'm totally awkward. There's no way to do it and not feel awkward at first.
Yeah.
Right. And then it becomes embodied and it's second nature, and it doesn't feel like selling at all. And it doesn't feel like marketing at all. And I think the same is true if you tend to be more on the logical, like business side. If you keep hitting a wall and you keep trying to find a strategy for your breakthrough, try something different. And that might be exploring your inner world or exploring something more spiritual that's less direct.
I'm Elysia Skye, and this is the Brilliance Method podcast. Through mindful, motivational, and often hilarious conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives, you'll discover new ways to create your life on purpose. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Brilliance Method. Today we are hanging out with the incredibly wonderful, intuitive, and energetic SpiritBird. And SpiritBird's journey began in childhood with interactions with spirit realms, psychic gifts, and prophetic dreams. But without a cultural understanding of these gifts, of course, the overwhelm and confusion led to a mental health crisis in her teens. She later came to recognize this as a spiritual initiation. Now, an international shamanic educator and best-selling author, she founded Holton Healing Arts, drawing upon over 15 years of expertise in shamanic healing and plant medicine guidance. Her mission is to empower others by honing their spiritual abilities for real-world success through transformative training. That is a formula for magic. Hi, SpiritBird. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that you shared a bit about that mental health crisis in your teens, and it's so relatable. And I definitely want to get into your journey. And before we talk about that piece, I want to know, because there's a lot of women listen to this podcast, a lot of men too. But when we see children having conversations with spirit, right? Some people call it imaginary friends or whatnot, but like we know what that is. So what was it like for you as little SpiritBird, having these energies around you and trying to figure out how to navigate them?
At the time, I don't really think I thought about it. It really wasn't until I got older and I started to realize that people were having different experiences, that questions started coming up. When I was little, it just was innate. It felt natural, talking to the trees, having, dreams and telling my mom and then seeing it happen shortly after. I think that my family noticed this in me, but as a kid, I wasn't like, oh, I have gifts. It was just life.
Yeah. Wow. And were your parents nurturing around this gift?
I think they were in the middle. They definitely, I don't think they quite knew what to do. Nobody really knew what to do with them. I think they saw it. They saw something happening. I would get comments from a lot of friends and family, even at a young age, that they felt that I had a great sense of spirit. They could tell that I was sensitive, but there really wasn't anything to do beyond that. So my upbringing was kind of half-hearted Catholic on my mom's side. So we did go to church. We weren't like the most intense churchgoers in the world. So there was like a little bit of the religious questioning around it, but not so much that it was, that I was attacked by anybody for like being dangerous or, going to the dark side or anything like that. And at the same time, there wasn't really nurturing in the sense of like, oh, here, this is what's happening. Let's help you navigate this. And that didn't really come in until I got older and actually did start to unravel a bit.
Wow. So tell us about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I think, tracking back, it's like for most kids, the veil is pretty thin when you're little anyway. And then when you get older, that starts to fade for a lot of us. And for me, for whatever reason, it almost became more materialized. So it went from like imaginary, quote unquote, imaginary friends or like talking to the trees to now I'm actually seeing spirit in the material realm. I think at the time it was jarring, but it was like I could tell that they weren't supposed to be there. It was like unusual enough that it was like something's different here. And so that question was coming in, and then along with just being sensitive in general and also being a teenager, which is like
hormones.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I started to get really depressed, I think was the first piece. I can kind of remember even as a kid, like when this sort of like sense of kind of this like gloomy feeling came in. I specifically remember sitting in my bed and thinking like, okay, so it's Sunday night. I'm going to have to go to school tomorrow. I don't really like school. And then I'm going to have to do it again for like the rest of this year. And then like again for the next, 10 years before I'm ever free. And so that kind of brought me down. And then as the gifts started to come in, I think I just kind of got a little disoriented towards like, what's happening here? Like, what is this in general? And eventually it started to spiral out. And I think that it was honestly probably a mixture of the spiritual gifts and not understanding what was happening and how to work with them. And probably a little bit of just mental health, being a teenager, navigating the things in the world. And so this is where my folks were really supportive. It took me a long time to talk about what was going on because I didn't even know how. I didn't even know how to bring up the subject of like, hey, I'm seeing things. It seems simple, but it didn't feel that way at the time. I didn't even know what questions to ask. So eventually when, it kind of, as it escalated, it started to trigger more kind of like, just like erratic behavior. I started sleeping less and then everything just started spiraling out more and more and more. Finally said something to my folks. I was like, I think I need help somehow. And really what actually broke that cycle is they've helped me find a therapist. We went through a couple before we found the right one. And I'm really, really grateful that they took that time with me and let me just use my discernment for who was a good fit. Happened to meet a fairly holistic therapist that's like, oh, and basically taught me about empathy. He used to say, I have a big antenna. He's like, look, you're picking up on a lot of stuff and it's not all yours. And that's really what was really the biggest breakthrough for me at the time, was to get context around what was happening for me.
Incredible. It sounds like your parents were really supportive, and that goes so far further than I think we even realize, just to meet our kids where we're at, or just to meet people where they're at. And I'm sure that attribute, it connects to you being such a wonderful person and how you are with your clients, meeting people where they're at, seeing where there's gaps, and this is what's going on and it's okay, right? Just the it's okay part. And I think we take that for granted, that it's okay. I remember having a panic attack on an airplane once. The turbulence was so bad, and I have a tendency to not love airplane rides, even though I fly over 30 times a year. And that's not for work. I follow Pearl Jam, so I'm that girl, but I don't like flying, but I fly all the time. And I had a panic attack on the plane, and my friend is sitting next to me, and he just looks at me and grabs my hand and he goes, it's going to be okay. And I just needed to hear that, like as a 30-something-year-old at the time. And when we are given permission to just be, and even your journey of, wow, school tomorrow, and then school the next day, and then year, right? I'm connecting the dots here is about freedom, that seeking of freedom. And that characteristic I believe connects to being an entrepreneur. And I wouldn't be surprised if we asked 100 entrepreneurs if they looked forward to going to school every day or not, because it's so systematic and formulated in just the schedule, right? We don't want that schedule necessarily, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's true. I remember also, around that time being a teenager, needing to figure out about college and that kind of thing. And it was like, wow, I have a gazillion interests. I remember at the time I was like, well, I don't want really a career. Like, but can I have a bookstore where I just get to like read and keep learning? Is that a thing?
I love that. Right. I think like all of us who are spiritual have this weird retirement dream of like, I'm going to have the crystal shop and the bookshop, and like, I'm going to open when I want and I'm going to close when I want. I don't need it to make money. I just want it to like be a thing that I do. And it's so fun. So I love that idea. So now could you share a little bit more about the work that you're doing presently in addition to your bio? Like how do you work with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, a number of different ways. I think for me and for most of the folks that are interested in learning from with me or from my team, the focus is really on spiritual gifts first. So that's partially from my own desire and interest. I find that it's fun and I like to lead with that. After I had that initial breakthrough with my therapist, I found shamanic work shortly after that. And like really jumped right in. Again, it gave me a bunch of context. I'm not like a spokesperson for shamanism. It just happened to be what gave me that context and language that I was missing. And so I trained formally for many years in my early 20s in that. And at the time, it wasn't like, oh, I'm healing. It was like, oh, this is interesting. Like I like using this part of my consciousness. And especially at the time, it wasn't like he would do it for work. So it was just something that I really enjoyed. And so I like to lead this work in that way too, where I find a lot of us, especially if you're finding that like everything in your life as far as your basic needs are met and there's somehow some kind of lack of fulfillment, I find a lot of us try to get that by like achieving more. It's like, okay, well, maybe I'll just grow and be bigger. Maybe I'll scale my business, or I'll make more money, or I'll try to get a best-selling book, or, something that has like an accolade to it. And usually that doesn't satisfy what we're looking for. And I find it's the spiritual gifts that really does that. It's this whole part of us and our consciousness that doesn't get used very much. And it's fascinating, it's fun, and it's really fulfilling. Wow. So that's kind of like my approach in general.
That's cool. So if somebody wanted to learn from you and work with you, how do they start?
Well, I have a couple different, entry points and programs. I mentioned to you, I work with kind of a process that I call the archetypes, the inner mastery archetypes. So that's a really great entry point. It gives people a framework of, okay, most of us, we all have all of these archetypes, and most of us tend to lean one way or the other as far as the archetypes are concerned. And along with that, that means that you'll tend to have certain gifts that are a little bit more innate. Again, we all have access to all of the spiritual gifts. It's just something you can learn. And some of us come in with them pretty strong already. It's like I came in like super psychic. I am not good at mechanics,
Right.
But I could learn. And so It goes both ways. So that's a really great entry point. We have a program for folks that want to grow their gifts and use it just like in their personal and professional life. And then also we have programs for folks that want to like actually train in their gifts, grow those, and bring it into their healing or coaching practice.
Amazing. Well, your archetypes link is going to be in the description, so everyone can grab that right now. And of course, your website. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that watch this show or listen to this show. And I'm curious, and on behalf of everyone, what was that process? So did you go to college and then, right, you had the dream, okay, maybe I'll open a bookstore, but what inspired you to actually start your own business as a shaman in the healing arts?
It took a long time, for sure. I didn't, the small business, like entrepreneur part was already in me. I think you're right in that, like, I didn't really want to use the system that was in front of me. I wasn't particularly interested in. It's not wrong. It works for some people, but it was not for me. So I had that opportunity, I think, that I was okay with not needing to follow this like predetermined path. from initially, actually, I started a business in body care. So me and my friend had put our heads together. I was beekeeping at the time. And so we were making 100% natural hair care and cosmetics.
That's fun.
It was super fun. Oh yeah. And we got to do, the trade shows, and we traveled and, got to play in a lot of different ways. And like looking back, I definitely was into the natural stuff, but cosmetics is not really like my primary thing. That was more on my business partner side. What I really wanted was that freedom piece. And that business wasn't really in alignment with me at all. And so I kept trying to like tweak it to try to make it feel like I was in alignment. I was definitely clear that I had like more of a message that I wanted to get out via business. But this one wasn't quite the right thing. And actually what was happening inside the business is it dragged on for a long time. So we never really lost money, but we weren't really making money either. So it was like constantly teetering on that spot of like, maybe we'll try this. Maybe we'll try 6 more months. And it just never really broke through. And actually it was my frustration with that had me begin to go inward again. So throughout all of that time, I'd been doing a lot of healing work. I'd been doing a lot of spiritual training and growth and that kind of thing, again, just because it was fulfilling for myself. When I was hitting the bumps with that business, it brought me back in to be like, what is this? What's happening here? And I think maybe long story short, what started to happen for me is I got really clear on a lot of the kind of, I guess, limiting beliefs or distortions that I had around bringing my spirituality and the business side together. Yeah. So you probably have encountered that plenty, I would guess, Elysia.
Yes. Yeah, but it's still a leap. It's a big leap. And I have a lot of clients and friends who are in the product business, and, they have an advantage and also a disadvantage. They have something that people want, and then there's, the marketing to it, and it's so fun and creative, but the financials that go into running a product business are much different than the financials that go into running a service business, where someone who is their own business, like a coach, or even if you have a team of coaches, your overhead is less and your forecasts are a bit less complicated, and you have the potential to make a lot more money faster. Doesn't mean in the long run, but faster, where when you look at someone with a product business, it could take a few years before they're really in the green. And same with restaurants, anything brick and mortar or product based. And it's not for the faint of heart. So like, brava to you and your business partner for going for it, and your love and, passion for natural products. So are they still doing it, your business partner?
Actually, she does. We put it down for a while, and then she picked it up and kind of does it on the side when it feels right for her, rather than
That's fun. I just love having friends who have products, because then when I send client gifts, it's like, oh, that's the first place I want to go, right? It's just like all the natural fun products. Like one of my friends has a silk eye mask called Sia Silk, and it's just 100% silk, and it has larger eye cups, and it's adjustable. It's like a luxury item. It's one of my favorite things to send to people. So it's just fun. So I am very curious about the plant medicine aspect of your business. And I've never done plant medicine, and people actually get really surprised when I mention that. And I've actually never done a lot of things. I didn't even smoke weed until I went through chemotherapy, and I actually needed it. In fact, I feel like it attributed to saving my life. But I'm super curious about plant medicine, and tell me your thoughts on this, because I know it's not always the case. I get so scared of throwing up. I hate throwing up. I hate being nauseous. And depending on which plant medicine it is, I've been told you might, and my friend said to me, don't call it throwing up. You call it getting well, because you're releasing things. But like, that's been my big resistance to it, which is so silly, because I know the immense breakthroughs and healing that would occur are so much better than if I was uncomfortable. So it's my own shit of, I got to get over being uncomfortable. Story of our lives, right, babe? So with that lovely lead up, tell us about plant medicine. I want to do it.
Well, I'll say first and foremost, it's not silly to be like, oh, that makes me not want to do it. That's the pretty normal response. And because it does depend on the medicine that you're working with, whether it's purgative or not. And even ones that are purgative, you might not actually experience nausea. during the experience. So there's a lot that goes into it. I find, I'll say, without nerding out too much, what the purge aspect for me is like even less about that you're getting rid of anything. I think of it more as like the functionality of it is that when you are purging, like you can't have resistance. It's like you're the most out of your way. So in that process, the medicine can really come in and work with you.
Wow.
That being said, it's not a requirement that happens to have really profound breakthroughs with the medicines.
Good to know.
Yeah. That part of my journey, that and the shamanic work really wove in and out through most of my life. Similarly, I remember writing papers when I was a teenager about psychedelic experiences before I'd actually done anything with them.
Cool. Of course you did.
Where did that even come from? And then I did, but I partied with them when I was younger. So, like early college, I partied with them a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then around the same time, I started going pretty heavy into the shamanic work. And so when I got into the shamanic work, I actually got pretty snooty about psychedelics for a while, because a lot of people were talking about how like, oh, they'll open your mind and do all this stuff. And I was kind of like, you don't even need them to do that. You can do it all without them, which is true.
Yeah.
And I love them. They're so amazing. And so that kind of wove in and out. And I actually went through, asking about the entrepreneurial side of things. I kind of went through a similar journey with both aspects of my work. So when I stepped into the spiritual work and being forward facing with training shamans and training healers, the real piece that I needed to get through was the whole charging money. And also just like, I was taught in a really rigid way. It wasn't bad, but I was taught with like an old paradigm concept, which I understand where it came from. But the idea was like, you wouldn't tell people you were a healer. Like automatically, if you even said that, that would be wrong. That would be ego and blah, 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 blah. So I really had to navigate all of those distortions and beliefs that weren't actually mine at all and make my way through that. And then kind of came forward and had to navigate, well, who am I to be like, oh, I am a healer, I am a shaman, and I can help you use your gifts. And the same was true with my journey with the psychedelic piece. Part of it comes from integrity. And I think part of it for me came from what I would call actually like a distortion around ethics, where I'm so caught on right and wrong that I'm actually limiting what spirit wants to happen. Yeah. So the psychedelic piece came forward too. It was like really insistent. And for both of those pieces, a lot of it did require that I just start and I just step forward and I just trust the process and let myself get it wrong sometimes. And what kept happening for me, especially with the psychedelics, is I felt like even though I'd been working with them for a long time, in the face of other people that seemed to be really confident and show up as like expert all the time, just pretty much however they are, I would get intimidated. And what was happening is the more I just opened my mouth and talked about my experience, regardless of whether people would agree or not, or if it seemed smart or not, I was finding that little pieces that I would share, people that considered themselves experts were like, whoa, you just blew my mind. And I'm like, really? Because I feel like this is really basic. And so I actually got to get reflected back to me that my perspective was valuable. Mm-hmm. So that just kind of snowballed and helped it all continue to like build itself up.
That's incredible. And we do take for granted that like, oh, well, like, who am I to be special, right? Who like, why would I be experiencing anything different than my seniors or the experts above us? And we are all unique beings having our own experience. And yeah, like as a teacher, I learned so much from my students always, and I remember my father said to me once, your children should always be better than you, right? Like raise them to be better people. You hope that they'll be smarter than you, all of that. So anyone that we look up to, I know that they do have an opportunity to learn from us as well, without going into an egoic place of, well, now I'm an expert, because I don't think anyone can like declare that about themselves early on in any way, or who even does. It's all just, semantics at this point. Like it's based on experience. So I've been told that with plant medicine and different types of medicine, even something as light as a cacao ceremony, it just opens your heart. So what is that experience like for anyone listening or watching who has never considered it or looked into it?
Hmm. Yeah, here again, different medicines do different things. So there are medicines that are specific for heart openers. There are medicines that are really helpful to help you get into your body. There are medicines that are helpful to allow you to let go of the physical and the body. And you can go in a lot of different directions, spirit and connecting to others versus connecting to yourself. But in general, I would say the way that they work, I mean, plants in general, as energetic beings, they're changers, they're change makers. Even coffee, right? Like it literally affects your body.
Yeah.
So with different kinds of plant medicines, essentially what they're doing on some level is dissolving boundaries. So any place, big or small, where you have like a clear, distinct separation, that's where it tends to dissolve. So you're talking about heart openers. In the heart, a lot of us, usually we're one or the other. So we're either, we feel really, really good inside of ourselves, but we get uncomfortable sharing that, or we are very externally oriented and we get really uncomfortable actually just feeling our own heart. And so what those heart openers might do is dissolve that little bit of barrier that has you from going in or out and connecting more. And the same with the other medicines is that, again, this is pretty broad, but in general, dissolving your boundaries and your separations between what makes you different than someone else, and beliefs that you have that you thought were concrete. It will kind of dissolve those and be like, actually, let's look at it like this. And this is where they become great opportunists as well, is by showing us completely different perspectives.
That's so great to hear. And I have so many friends who are like, I got a bunch of mushrooms in the van, like, let's go do them. And I want to do mushrooms, and I feel like I would really do well with like just a hero's journey and just do it, right? But I want to do it with a guide. I don't want to do it for the first time by myself. And do you find that to be helpful?
I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
There's a little hesitation in that I don't want to say that you should do it with a guide in a way that disempowers your own personal experience, but I can say for sure from my experience from partying with them, and then I started to learn how to use them intentionally. And then there was a separate part where I got to experience like plant medicine ceremony as it is. And all of those are entirely different experiences. So I can say for sure, it's not that it's necessarily dangerous to do it on your own or that you won't have a big breakthrough or an amazing experience. It is not the same as doing it with a skilled practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just entirely different experiences.
Cool. I feel like that's a confirmation for what I was desiring to do anyway. And anytime I feel called on something, I go deep into a rabbit hole of knowledge. And I feel like you're probably the same way. And when I first started looking into any of this stuff, even friends who were, doing ayahuasca and whatnot, I just watched documentaries. I read books. I learned about how the government was actually using LSD and mushrooms and different things to help heal people. And they went down to, it was either Mexico or South America, and they were learning from shamans. Like our own government put a project together to learn from shamans how to heal people's anxieties and depression. And then also, things like Parkinson's, right? It helps. Some of them can help with Parkinson's and things like that, and Alzheimer's. And then when administration changed at some point in the 60s, like it got shut down, or maybe it was the 70s, right? It got shut down because the government was looking down on the use of any medicine in that regard at all. And, then it became the war on drugs and here we are. Right. So it's, so the brief history lesson, but it's only now becoming something that people are regularly talking about. And you're seeing these therapeutics more and more online. And I think just the fact that people are curious is a really good sign, even myself. And yeah, what a gift for anyone who gets an opportunity to go and just heal and experience this with you and your team or anyone that they connect with in that way. Because we have to feel safe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We really have to trust and listen to our intuition. Mm-hmm. I am curious about shamanism in general. And I will say you are the first person on the show that has a shamanic background. And I want to educate our audience a bit on that. And I have my own experience working with my shaman, but I haven't never shared about that. So
Oh, great.
yeah, let's get real basic. Spirit
Okay.
Bird, what's a shaman?
Okay. Super, super, super simplified answer to that is essentially a conduit. So shamans connect the realms. They connect the non 3D realms. They connect the spirit world to our material world. I think traditionally, so like they've had a position in cultures where typically community would have one or two people that are acting as the shaman, meaning it's their job or their role to help maintain the balance for the community by communicating with the spirit realm. The reason that we know about plants is largely because the plants were like, hey, person, use me for this, use me for this. And someone who had the ability to hear that was like, oh, okay, let me try this. So I'm going to try to not like over complicate this or nerd out too much, but I feel that traditionally they have had a pretty revered position in the community. And also, they're not really more important than any other member in the community. Mm-hmm. And what I see is happening now collectively is that more people are waking up to this part of them. So what I actually think is happening is more people are interested in and becoming shamans or starting a shamanic process so that they can be this in their own life. And so again, it's kind of broad in that they're basically conduits, essentially in shamanic beliefs, I would say, like worldview, everything has spirit in it. And so you can communicate with anything by talking directly to its essence or to the spirit in it.
I love that. And it's something you're so clear on, you know, and even going back to how we started, you, since you were little, have, even if you didn't understand your gifts, like you felt connected to them. And what a wonderful thing. And I feel like that's a big part of what you do is you help people either connect or reconnect to their gifts. So how can someone really own their gift, whatever that is?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me feel that one for a second. I probably have a slightly different perspective on gifts than the mainstream. You have what most of us think of as intuitive gifts, the clairs, being psychic, what else? All kinds of things. You can working with sacred geometry, talking to plants, all of this stuff are part of our gifts. But I think when I think of like your unique gift, that's really the medicine that you carry inside of you as an individual. And it's usually a combination of your spiritual knowledge, maybe working with some of those, like working with the clairs or working with your intuition in some way, mixed with your actual life experience, like what you actually had to overcome and go through. And usually where those two things meet, that's what we would call like your gift, your medicine. And you don't have to be a shaman professionally, or you don't have to be a healer professionally to be leading with your medicine. So how can you really own that? I think is getting clarity on what that is and then being connected to how that feels in your body so that wherever you are or wherever you're going, you're holding your medicine. And that tends to create situations where it wants to come out and interact with people, which is also, again, part of the fulfillment. Feels really good.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciated how you shared. It's also connected to your life experiences because we can have gifts as children and teenagers, but we have limited life experiences, but that doesn't mean they're not valid. So we can own and meet ourselves at our gifts at that place in our life. And then it makes so much sense as we get older and we have these aha moments or more awakening opportunities because we've had more life experience. So it's like we're never done learning. And you just explained that so well. Like as we just keep aging, we keep having more life experiences, and therefore that enhances our natural gifts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's fun. Well, you mentioned earlier about I'm going to paraphrase, but it was around, like, what do I charge, or should I not charge, or should I call myself a healer? Right. That kind of conversation. And that does come up here and there for a lot of people, especially spiritual business owners. And some of it I feel is lineage. There's a lot of ancestry that's connected to those beliefs, and also just modern stuff, people who don't understand what it is to be a healer or what it is to charge your worth. And I want to talk about charging. I want to talk about the money piece. But before we do, I want everybody to own if they are a healer. I just want them to own it. I wish that for everyone, because being a healer looks different depending on who you are. Like comedians, like some of the greatest healers on this planet. It doesn't mean they lay hands on people or they lead ceremony or anything like that, but they are here to bring light to situations to help people feel better. And as a soul, I believe we come in with these traits, these attributes. Our light is love, and I believe that's what we are. But if you come in as a healer, you might express it differently as a human than somebody else who's also coming in as a healer. I tend to look for funny people in my life, and I've tended to surround myself with not even professional comedians, but at times I have, people who love to laugh and people who appreciate humor and people who can make light of something and not take things so seriously because they're inviting healing. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Thank you for naming that.
Yes, my pleasure. And when it comes to charging for spiritual services, what's your take on that?
I feel like we hear that phrase, charge your worth. And for me, I think of it actually as like charging for the value that your service provides, the solution that you help people navigate.
Yeah.
So that can be helpful if you're wondering about charging and you feel it's like about like you and you needing to be more, like that can be a tricky spot where it's like, oh, well then if I charge a little bit amount, then I must be telling myself that I'm not worthy. And it's like, it's not quite always that literal. And there's times for me where I've fluctuated on my price points, and that's part of, my work with listening to spirit when I'm making offers, is that sometimes it's a lot. And sometimes it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, the energy needs to flow. And that requires that I tweak things a little bit. And so maybe there's a special opportunity or a discount, or I pivot a little bit, and I'm still holding the value of what I offer. I'd also say that when it comes to that value, it's going to look different for different people. So that's where, we're talking about like holding your worth, holding your gifts, owning that is really the key. There is going to be, for any number of my groups that have come together, there is usually most of the people are like, whoa, I can't believe you didn't charge twice as much for this. And then there's almost always like one person in the group that is actually more resourced than everybody else, right? And they're sort of like, oh, well, this was a lot, and have like really high expectations, right?
Yeah.
And the difference isn't about how resourced they are or not. The difference is like what they're actually valuing. And so to me, it's more about really holding that place of what you value and locking that in. And that is what connects you with the people that want your services. People that don't care about spiritual gifts are not going to see the value in what I offer. People that do are going to be like, holy shit. Mm-hmm. So, we were talking about my first business, and actually that was a struggle for me then too. I was totally in the distortion. People would come and buy something, and I would like feel like I needed to give them something else for free, like isn't that? And before I went full in, like forward facing with the shamanic work, I tiptoed around it. I started with I think I called myself a meditation coach, because I thought that was more accessible for people. And it really wasn't until I got in, we use the word alignment all the time, but it was really true, into the alignment of like what I actually cared about, and went forward facing with that I think the worth and the value and the people I wanted to work with and this very specific work I like to do all matched up. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And like people who see the value, like people and people also who are willing to buy on a luxury level. And when I say luxury, it's because they value themselves. They want to feel something premium for themselves. Like they don't care. People who buy luxury don't care about discount. You know, it's like that's not what they're looking for, even though they want the value. So I think people have to wrap their brains around that a little bit, because there's a learning curve to that, especially how you were brought up, regardless of your definition of a healer or not. Right. We see ourselves differently. And I really like how you explained just the value piece. And I share that with my clients all the time. And there is always somebody less talented and less kind than you charging more.
Yeah.
Okay. Like there just always is. So it's okay. Like there are people for them. There are people who are really getting a lot out of that. And we want to invite an energetic match. And if you're seeing your value, Spirit Bird, and you're holding space for that, you're going to attract people who either also do or just want that for themselves. And what a beautiful thing. What a beautiful mirror to hold up by saying, this is what it is. I know that these results are worth this or more. Right? That more piece is really helpful, especially for people who are scared to charge what they want. It's like, well, what is it really worth? When you break it all down, what's it really worth? Well, it's really worth like 10 grand, but I can't charge $10,000 an hour. It's like, okay, well, can you charge 500? Because that's a big gap. I bet you can. It's like, okay, well, no, yeah. Right. So we have to get there ourselves. We have to be comfortable with it. One of my many jobs when I was in my 20s, trying to figure out my life, like, not that I'm done, but I sold. I was like, I always had some weird fucking job. I worked at the mall and they set up a place for us to sell electric cat litter boxes called Cat Genies. And I still swear by these things. I love this friggin' thing. But one thing I learned about sales is if you believe in what you're selling, if you believe in your offer, if you know that it works, like price point, you will sell it. People will buy it because it actually works. It actually does the thing it's supposed to do. And the second those cat genies started breaking down and I didn't know how to fix them, my sales went down. Because there was a shakiness in my confidence of the offer. And then there was a learning curve, which was, yeah, it's an electronic product. It's going to break down on occasion. What if your cat has a hairball and throws up in the thing, right? So then when I learned how to clean it and fix it, then my sales went up again. So there's a navigation piece that goes into it, because we can have a client that might have a difficult experience, right? Like whether it's us with them or them with us or whatnot. And so we can't let it rock us. So how do you navigate that when that's come up? You know, it's not like every person who buys from us is easy or perfect, you know, or like our ideal client usually, but once in a while there's challenges. So how do you not let that rock you?
Mm-hmm. There's a number of things here, I think. One is celebrating the no's as much as the yeses. Like if you can not be attached to that the yes is better, that helps a ton. In actual sales conversations, keeping the goal on clarity is key for me. So even if you're a no, but you're actually clear that your no is because you're choosing no right now and you're not in a distortion of a story you're making up about why you can't, that's fine. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be right now, as long as you're not buying into the illusion. And then for me personally, when I've been in those like little ebbs, when I am kind of like in those divots where I am questioning or not sure or have been rocked or shaken a little bit, then for me, like that's definitely an opportunity. This is the place where I get to kind of have a little mini journey. It's clear that there's somewhere in here in my system where I'm still buying into something that I don't actually think is true, where I'm still believing something that isn't my truth and my reality. So when I'm kind of knocked off a little bit by someone else's reaction or no or doubt, it gives me the opportunity to kind of journey and venture around. And then I come back like even stronger and even clearer in who I am, what I offer, the value that brings.
I would imagine a big part of your success is how well you take responsibility for your own energy and your own perspective.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's important. And there's a lot of healers, spiritual teachers, even amazing massage therapists or meditation coaches, right? That haven't yet chosen to understand the business aspect. And I have so much compassion. And that's mostly why people come to me too, right? Is to just get out of their own way and what are they willing to do from a business perspective? And I read this quote this morning that was like, don't ask yourself what you want to do or what you don't want to do. Ask yourself what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do. I was like, what a great quote. And I think about that from a business perspective for spiritual people, because they tend to get overwhelmed. They make assumptions of, oh, I'm not good at technology, so therefore I could never build a website or a sales funnel or, run my Instagram or whatever it is, right? And I always come back to, with compassion, that's a choice. Like, you are highly intelligent, but I will say we have our zone of genius, which is in healing. And then we have our zone of excellence or competence or incompetence, which could have everything or anything or nothing to do with the technology pieces or just the fear of sales and all that stuff. And what I've found with sales conversations is once you work through it from a mental and emotional place, the strategic and technical pieces are so easy, where when you're first starting, you're like, give me the sales script, I will follow it. It's like, cool. Follow it until you break through.
Yeah. And then it's embodied.
So that's a gift that you have, though, and I see it in you because I have it in me too, is being willing to embrace the business side of being a business owner. And that takes courage. Was there a time where you were resisting it?
Oh, most of my life.
Yeah.
That's the piece I had to learn. I totally agree that I can understand. I remember it. I know the feeling of like, oh, I don't like the marketing. It feels manipulative, or I don't like pressuring, or I don't like technology. There's like, this is kind of where I go back to the distortion of ethics, where it's like, oh, there's this system that I see that's actually bad or poison. And if I use that, then that means I'm that, or that means that I'm doing things for the wrong reason. And then that's what I had to navigate. Is like, for me, I got to the point where I was like, actually, my soul is not going to be satisfied unless I do this work in this lifetime in this way. And what I wanted to do initially is I wanted to spiritually bypass all of the business and marketing stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, can I just skip that part entirely? And that was my experience also. Like, I got help with that. If you're totally confident in your skills and ability of what you offer, and the holdup is tech, that's easy. Hire somebody, learn how to do it, whatever you need to do, right? So for me, that whole learning that piece was really important. And I did have to navigate. It was a big part of my healing journey, healing all of those places where I had resistance, and all the places that it turns out I had a different perspective on, that wasn't true when I actually looked at it. And it was like, oh, actually, this isn't true anymore. Now I'm experiencing it a different way. So and then as I learned that, I'm totally awkward. There's no way to do it and not feel awkward at first.
Yeah.
Right. And then it becomes embodied and it's second nature, and it doesn't feel like selling at all. And it doesn't feel like marketing at all. And I think the same is true if you tend to be more on the logical, like business side. If you keep hitting a wall and you keep trying to find a strategy for your breakthrough, try something different. And that might be exploring your inner world, or exploring something more spiritual that's less directly connected, because they're still connected. And same thing. It's like we want to like get to this certain income level so that we can have that freedom. Well, you might access it before then by tapping into, your spiritual side a little bit more. And then obviously, like, they both are so beautiful together. I was thinking about this on my walk this morning, is that I work with a lot of women that like to do womb work, and there's a big emphasis on the feminine coming back right now, right? Which I love, and to me is really partnership is what is trying to happen in our world right now. And I was like, oh yeah, I was talking to a prospective person the other day, and they were talking about wanting to lead with the womb wisdom and like really avoiding some of the 3D, like write a budget, map out like what do you actually need to pay your bills like this month? Do you even know that number? And it was like, well, the womb feminine wisdom is really powerful, but if it doesn't have the masculine, it doesn't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And is that what we want? Is that what we're trying to do?
No.
Sorry, little soapbox there, but
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a yin. That's why we have a yin yang, right? It's like there is a balance to be had. Well, if I know it's been a minute, but if you can remember some of that resistance you broke through, I'm sure there's people listening right now that are like, just give me a little nugget to help me get through this resistance. So if you could share, like, what was a piece of your resistance? For mine, it was, oh, people are going to judge me. People are going to think I gave up acting, or people are going to think this or that. Right. So like, what was some of the resistance, and can you remember even one of the many pieces and how you broke through it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. If I can, I'll try to describe this clearly. I call this process like the other side of the circle. So when I was offering my spiritual work, there was that like block around, I'm so afraid that people are going to think that I'm just trying to get their money. That was like my block. It's like, oh, it's going to feel like that. They're going to think that I'm just trying to get their money. What I realized is if you're imagining a circle, for a lot of my life prior to that, I was on one side of the circle, and I was, free spirit. I was doing different types of work. I was playing, I was exploring a lot of different things. I did not take a conventional route in my life. And while I was there, I was often looking at the other side of the circle for people that did follow convention. And I was totally judging them. I was like, you're so misguided. Like, you will not be fulfilled that way. Like, priorities are out of whack. Like, I couldn't even understand why or how people would just do that. Mm-hmm. And so I really had to soften around that. And what started to shift for me is like, oh my gosh, like this whole time that I've been, being a free spirit, I've been deeply working on learning like very existential pieces, really exploring consciousness, understanding how energy works, deep training. And people on the other side of the circle that I was judging are looking at me like, when is she going to get it together? Like, what a waste of time, blah, blah, blah. And so here we are. And then now I'm actually ready to step into my work and my business and show up in the material in a very different way. And I need money to do that, is a reality. Mm-hmm. And then here they are, having spent a lot of their life maybe doing a 9-to-5 to find financial stability. And now their existential questions are coming up and they need help. And actually, we just need each other right now, is all that this is. So I think that seeing is what allowed me to have some freedom, and it allowed me to also release some of the judgments I had on others, and also the judgments I had on myself around being ready for something different.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Like, we cannot assume that everyone has it all together. Right? And people are looking at us like, oh, you've got it all together, like spiritually, but I'm a mess. It's like, no, I don't have it all together spiritually. I'm still doing this. I've dedicated my life to doing this work so that I can figure it out before my last breath. So that's kind of the point. So you've had a very rich and fulfilling and interesting journey. And so going from, I've got this holistic product business with my business partner and then meditation coach, how did you break out of the box of meditation coach going into, no, this is who I am, especially in regards to what you're offering?
Mm-hmm. Really had to get clear about what I really loved the most and what excited me the most. And to me, that is stepping into your genius. That's usually the breakthrough between having like a successful business and like a wild, amazing business that you love. Yeah. It often is specific. It's often niche. It's often, you'll probably have thoughts like, who would want that? Like, would anybody even know what I was talking about? Why would they sign up for that? That is kind of the place I found is fulfilling on lots of different levels. Mm. And it is out of the box in some ways. I think when we're evaluating what would be successful or what would sell, we will often look for examples. And then it's kind of human nature to try to mimic that in some way. And I keep finding it over and over again, the more I can just really be clear about like, what is fun and enjoyable for me? Because this is where my joy in teaching will come through and be felt. even if it is like very specific or not a lot of people would get it, that has been, part of my journey.
Thank you. It's such a great reminder that if we do what we feel motivated and if we do what we feel motivated and inspired to do, the universe will conspire in our favor and bring us abundance in whatever form we're meant to receive that abundance. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, on that note, last question. In the United States, we have a lottery that has gotten up to $2 billion. And I dream about this a lot. And I dream about all the things I would do. So I'm curious, if you were to win $1 billion, right after taxes, maybe it's like 500 million. What's the first thing you do when you found out that you won?
The first thing that I do?
Yeah. And there's a second question coming after that.
Yeah. The celebration is probably champagne and pizza.
Yes. I love that. And then now that you have all this money in the world, how are you spending your time?
Ooh, I love that because I thought you were going to ask me how I was going to spend my money. Although some of it's the same. Right now, I'm super obsessed with trees. Trees. I love them. I want to plant them. I want them everywhere. So that might be some of it. I still just, all things said and done, I really love having my hands in the dirt. And more celebrations with people, I think, is where I'm spending my time, whether it's paid or not, like just intentional gatherings where when we're gathering around a common purpose, and we're celebrating together. That's how I like to spend my time.
I love that. I love that so much. And my favorite part of the lottery question is it gives us clues into what we could be doing more of now, regardless of the money, right? So get your hands in the dirt, go celebrate in many more ways. I love this, and we will be celebrating you. And I'm so grateful that you shared your time, your energy, and your brilliance with us today on this show. And I would love everyone to check out HoltonHealingArts.com. The link will be in the description. If you're listening, it's Holton, HOLTON, healingarts.com. And if you do a /archetypes, you will find that archetype quiz.
Essentially, yeah, it's an assessment. It'll help you find what your archetype is, and then you'll get a sweet little document that lays out the core gifts that you have and then the core blocks you have and magical tools you can use to help open those up.
Amazing. Well, I am going to do it, so I can't wait to see which one I am. And I was recently on SpiritBird's show, so make sure that you listen to the Holton Healing Arts podcast as well.
Your show is going to be out beginning of April. So I'm super excited for that to air. And you'll be on my show, Leading with Spirit. On Leading with Spirit, we talk about shamanism, about gifts, and what it takes to navigate a spiritual business. And then because I'm who I am, I throw psychedelics in there a little bit too. So I'm so excited for that to come out. It's been a while since we've really gone direct at navigating the spiritual business, especially from the way that you experience it and help people. So if you haven't listened to that already, make sure you check out that episode.
Thank you, darling. So for everyone, listen to or watch Leading with Spirit. The podcast is incredible. I'm a fan. I actually reached out to SpiritBird and was like, I want to be on your show. And then I was, and now we're friends. And, and here we are. So it's an incredible show. Check that out, as well as these other wonderful offerings and your website. So thank you again. I wish you such a beautiful, wonderful day to you, my dear, and to everyone listening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elysia. And thank you for reaching out. I'm so glad you did.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.